We have officially reached a new low in the United States of America, both in terms of morality and stupidity, because we're now openly using violence against migrant women and children who are fleeing violence. Now, for those of you who spent any time on the internet today, then you know exactly what I'm talking about, because there's this picture that's been making the rounds that shows the United States using tear gas against a migrant family. And as you can see, this woman here who is seeking asylum in the United States is running away from tear gas with her 2 children. Now, as AP reports, migrants approaching the U.S. border from Mexico have been enveloped with tear gas after a few tried to breach the fence separating the 2 countries. U.S. agents shot the gas, according to an Associated Press reporter on the scene. Children were screaming and coughing in the mayhem. We're using tear gas against children. Doesn't matter that there are children in the crowd, they still decided to use tear gas. Now let me remind you that these are individuals who are seeking asylum. Most of these migrants are headed here from Honduras, because Honduras recently became overwhelmingly violent after a coup that took place in 2009 that the United States tacitly backed. But nonetheless, that doesn't matter. These people are seeking asylum, and that doesn't even do anything to convince us that we need to at least hear them out. Now, what took place was there were about 500 migrants in Tijuana near the U.S. border. They were chanting, "We aren't criminals, we are hard workers." Now, you're probably going to see footage of the protesters getting rowdy and throwing rocks at the border fence, and reportedly some even threw rocks at U.S. border agents as well. And I'm sure that images like this will be used to justify our use of tear gas against hundreds of migrants who were essentially protesting in order to encourage the U.S. to hear their cases sooner. But in the midst of all of this coverage, you're probably not going to hear their side of the story. You're probably not going to hear about how most of them were peaceful. And you're also probably not going to hear about how these migrants are being harassed in Tijuana, even physically assaulted by locals in Tijuana who are punching them, throwing stones at them, because they dare to show up in their area to try to better their lives and petition the U.S. government for asylum. Now, as you hear all the reasons why these migrants are bad and deserved it and how they're criminals, even though that's not true, keep in mind that regardless of the details here that you're going to hear in the mainstream news, there's no justification for using tear gas against a crowd when there are women and children in that crowd. Young children, toddlers, who could be harmed, physically so, by that tear gas. That's a level of violence that is so barbaric that there is no justification for it. But wait, because our government is going to do just that. They're going to try to justify our use of tear gas against children, because as Vice's Tim Hume explains, U.S. Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen on Monday defended the use of tear gas fired by U.S. Border Patrol agents at a group of migrants who tried to illegally cross a border fence. Nielsen said the gas was fired to disperse the migrants and that U.S. would not tolerate, quote, lawlessness. The incident, which left migrant families with children scrambling to escape the toxin, was condemned by Democrats and activists. So this is essentially the state of America in 2018. We are now resorting to using violence against children in order to dissuade their parents from coming into our country and applying for asylum, which is legal, mind you. Anyone can show up to a legal port of entry and apply for asylum. And that's what these people are wanting. They're only saying, at a minimum, please just hear our case. But we're not even doing that. We're using violence against them and their children. And understand that this is particularly egregious because our country, we love to create refugees. We like to meddle in the affairs of other countries and create violence. But when people flee that violence, when we create refugees, we don't want to do anything to help out said refugees. It's not just these Honduran migrants, it's Syrian refugees. And now we are seeing officials in our country scramble to justify the use of tear gas against a crowd that had children in it. Now, Ron Colburn, the former Border Patrol deputy chief, joined the right-wing chorus of defenders who tried to justify the use of tear gas against children, and assured us that there's really nothing morally reprehensible about this. In fact, it's morally defensible because there was a legitimate reason to use tear gas, and also because it's really not that big of a deal.
When you look at the story, where apparently hundreds of them just decided, we're frustrated, let's make a run at the border. There was a small hole they were able to puncture through the border wall, and they hurled all sorts of rocks, etc., at the Border Patrol agents, and then they fired the tear gas. Is that warranted?
Absolutely. And to clarify, the type of deterrent being used is OC pepper spray. It's literally water, pepper, with a small amount of alcohol for evaporation purposes. It's natural. You could actually put it on your nachos and eat it. So it's a good way of deterring people without long-term harm.
Well, that settles it. It's perfectly morally justifiable for the US government to use tear gas against children because it's really not that harmful. You can even put it on your nachos. Okay, well, if that's true, then do it. Put tear gas on your fucking nachos and eat it on national television. Prove to us that you believe the bullshit that you're espousing. Do it. Eat pepper spray on your nachos. Do it. You're not going to do it for the same reason why the lobbyist famously wouldn't drink the poison that he referred to as safe. Because OC spray is harmful, and he knows it's harmful. In fact, a Florida deputy was suspended just last month for spraying grade school children with it, 4 children to be exact, and the sheriff in that county said that was punishable specifically because OC spray is a, quote, serious tool that we use in the field, adding, it has no business being deployed around the children we are supposed to keep safe. And the reason why we don't use pepper spray on children is because regardless of how, quote, natural you say it is, it can cause permanent problems for their vision. You don't know which children in that crowd had asthma. They are at a significantly higher risk for problems and complications when exposed to tear gas. But I'm trying to explain logic and reason and facts to these people when just the mere fact that we're entertaining whether or not it's justifiable for the US government to use pepper spray against children in and of itself is an absurd discussion. We shouldn't have to be talking about this. We shouldn't be trying to dig for any justification we can find because the government should not be using tear gas against fucking children. Have we lost our minds in this country? Since when have we condoned violence against children, physical violence against children? Never mind the economic violence and support for genocide that harms children in countries like Yemen. But we are now directly using violence against children ourselves, and people are trying to actually find justifications for it. This is a new low for the United States, and I'm embarrassed to be an American because this is not how a modern egalitarian country is supposed to act. We don't disperse tear gas into crowds that have children in them. I thought that was something we all just understood. I thought that was a universal moral objective of everyone. We protect children. We protect those who can't defend themselves. But apparently in 2018, that's not the case anymore.
Support this podcast by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Humanist Report.